Hey, I'm Alex. Today on Big Al Books, I'm going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. I don't know if I'm supposed to be freaked out because the year's like halfway done, or if I'm supposed to be freaking you out with the crazy shit that I've been reading, but either way, I'm going to give this tag a try. I was tagged over by Conrad at 7 Days at Sea, which was good timing because I was going to do this tag anyway. Because, you know, that mid-year window is only open for so long. So anyway, let's get to it. Question number one is best book read this year. For new releases, I'm going to have to go with Lincoln in the Bardo. I read it back in February and I'm still thinking about it quite a bit. I liked that it was set during the Civil War time period and that it was also set in a graveyard. There were so many fun, spooky ghost characters, and I thought about death a lot, which was quite an intense emotional experience while I was reading it, and it was quite a powerful read, and I am looking forward to checking out the audiobook sometime in the second half of this year because I've heard that is also quite the experience. As for my favorite book that I've read this year that isn't a new release, I'd have to give it to The Crying of Lot 49 by Thomas Pynchon. He blew my mind in under 150 pages, which is hard to do, and I loved reading about the conspiracies in this book. It is dense, it is brilliant, it's funny. I loved this book. Question number two, best sequel you read this year. The only sequels I read were books 2 in trilogies. So I read The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss and Cat and Mouse by Gunter Grass, and I didn't really enjoy either of these books, so I don't know which one to give it to. I mean, Wise Man's Fear was just long and bloated and really needed an editor, and Cat and Mouse was kind of the opposite. It was short, and I just felt like it was a little wisp of a novel, so I can't say that I really was impressed with either of these sequels. Question number three, new release I haven't read yet but want to. I just went and picked this book up from the library, so it'll probably be the new release that I get around to reading next. It's called Isadora, and it's by Amelia Gray, and it's a fictional book, but it deals pretty closely with the life of Isadora Duncan, who is a dancer that is famous for pioneering the modern style of dance. So this book, I think, is set around the time of her life when her 2 children have just died in an accident. So I'm hoping this book is going to be sad and beautiful. Question number 4, most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I'm looking forward to Sing Unburied Sing by Jesmyn Ward. I haven't read any of her stuff before, but she's been on my radar ever since she put together this collection of essays called The Fire This Time. So it was all about having this new generation of Black writers writing about race, and it was inspired by the James Baldwin collection, The Fire Next Time. So that sounded cool. But anyway, this new book is about some kind of journey that takes place in Mississippi, and it was compared to The Odyssey, William Faulkner, and Toni Morrison. So that's all I need to hear. I am there. Question number 5, biggest disappointment. And I feel bad with this answer, and I just want to say that this was by no means a bad book. It was just disappointing because I had really high expectations, and that book was Universal Harvester by John Darnielle. I just love John Darnielle. I love his work with the Mountain Goats. They put out an awesome record a few weeks ago called Goths that I'm just loving, and I really liked his first novel called Wolf and White Van, and this book sounded like it was going to be so good. It was about this guy working at a video store in Iowa, and someone started splicing these creepy images into the cassette tapes, and it just sounded like it was going to be this like creepy horror novel, and it didn't exactly end up being that. It just kind of ended up being this sort of mediocre novel. It didn't leave that much of an impression on me, and I just really wanted to love it a lot more than I actually did. Question number 6, biggest surprise. I would have to go with Company Town by Madeline Ashby. I only read this book because it was on the Canada Reads shortlist, and it was the book on the shortlist that I was not looking forward to reading. I thought that I'd just kind of have to power through it so that I could say that I'd read it. I knew it was going to be this sci-fi book set in some futuristic oil rig society, and I just wasn't looking forward to it. But then I was surprised how quickly I got into the story. I was surprised with how engaging the plot was. It was such a page turner, and I was surprised how much fun I had reading this book. It had a really kick-ass female protagonist and an intriguing story that got me thinking a lot about what the future might look like. And from a book that I was dreading reading, I had such a good time, and I'm really happy that it made it onto the shortlist and that I got the chance to give this a read. Question number 7, favorite new author, debut or new to me? I'm going to go with Lee Maracle. I had read one of her poems before in the past, so I guess she's not like brand new to me, but still, I'd never read one of her novels before, and I read one called Raven Song, and it just really impressed me. Like, I know that she is a writer that I can't wait to explore more of her works and delve deeper into everything that she's done. I was impressed with the wide range of styles in this novel. There are some beautiful, lyrical, dreamlike passages, especially when the mythical characters Raven and Cedar are watching over the community. But then there are also some really sharp, funny, cutting scenes. There's some good social satire in here. One of the main characters comes from a First Nations community, but she goes to school in the white part of town, so it can be very disorienting for her as she tries to figure out like what white people are all about. And there's a brilliant scene in this book when she is at her white friend's house for dinner, and she's just so thrown off with all the tension that's lying underneath the surface at this dinner party. Like, she doesn't understand how much rage is hidden under everyone's good table manners, and there's just so much passive aggressiveness. So this book can be so like deep and lyrical, but it can also be really funny and satiric, and it really transported me to another place and time. So I was just so impressed with Lee Maracle as a writer, and after I finished this book, I went and ordered more of her books. I picked up another one of her novels called Celia's Song, and I also picked up some of her nonfiction. This one's called I Am Woman, a Native Perspective on Sociology and Feminism. So glad I finally got around to reading her this year, because I'm hoping she can become one of my favorites. Question number 8, newest fictional crush. Well, I fell hard for a small bit character in Buddenbrooks by Thomas Mann. So his name was Sigismund Gauche, and instead of me telling you about him, I'm going to read the scene that he is introduced in the novel. Sigismund Gauche the broker was a bachelor, about 40 years old, and despite appearances the most honest and kind-hearted man in the world, but he was an aesthete, an original thinker. His clean-shaven face was marked with sharp features, an arching nose, a jutting, pointed chin, and a wide, down-turned mouth, its thin lips pressed tight, giving him a wicked look. He strove to give the impression of being a wild, handsome, scheming devil, to play the role of a wicked, crafty, interesting villain, somewhere between Mephistopheles and Napoleon, and he pulled it off rather well. His gray hair was combed over his brow for sinister effect. He regretted not being hunchbacked. He was an exotic and attractive character among the bourgeois inhabitants of the old commercial town. I fell for Sigismund right away. I loved the idea of this theatrical drama queen in the midst of all these serious businessmen, and I loved that he just wants to be perceived as a villain even though he's actually a really nice guy. What can I say? I just have a thing for eccentric old guys. Question number 9, newest favorite character. I'm only halfway through Don Quixote, but I am digging Sancho Panza. I find him hysterical. He is always using these weird cliches in his speech and all these malapropisms, and I love the idea that when you think of, a knight squire, he should be this loyal and noble figure, but Sancho is like crass, and he's always questioning Don Quixote. He's always cross with him. There's this scene where Sancho gets tossed in a blanket by his enemies, and he is just so salty about that incident. Like, he won't let Don Quixote forget it, that he didn't come and rescue him from this blanket tossing. So I just love how sassy he is, and really enjoy spending my time with Sancho. Question number 10, book that made me cry. I'm gonna have to go with Lincoln in the Bardo again. I was out in public when I was finishing up this book, and I had to try so hard to like contain my emotions to keep myself from crying because I was in like a teacher's staff lounge and I'm like, I don't need to do this right here, right now. This is gonna be weird. So I had to use like all my energy to like not cry, and then I got home that afternoon and just like cried a bunch of times that evening. I was just thinking about how beautiful and tragic life was. So yeah, this book really brought the tears. Question number 11, book that made me happy. I'm gonna go with The View from the Cheap Seats by Neil Gaiman, which I listened to on audio, and I'm like not even that big of a Neil Gaiman fan. Like I haven't read that much of his stuff, and I kind of picked this up on a whim. I saw it at the library, and I feel like through listening to this book, I really started bonding with Neil Gaiman because he was just like my friend in the car for like a few months. I feel like it's a really long book, and I just really grew to enjoy the sound of his voice. He has a great voice, and he was telling me all these stories. Like I started talking to him at some points. You know, I'd be like, "Shut up, Neil," or like I feel like we had a relationship almost by the end of listening to this audiobook, which was a lot of fun. So, you know, I liked having a friend out of a book, even though my friend abandoned me and I had to return him to the library, but still, I had a lot of fun listening to this audiobook. Question number 12, favorite book to film adaptation, and that would easily have to be T2 Trainspotting, which was a loose remake of Porno by Irvine Welsh, which is the Trainspotting sequel. In fact, this movie was a lot better than this book because this book is weird. It's like the Trainspotting gang gets together and tries to make a porno film, and like it's kind of a mess of a novel, but this film is actually really beautiful. Like it drew on the nostalgia from the first film, and it was a great examination of life from this middle-aged perspective, and I had such a great time watching it and really like did not ruin anything about the original, which I was worried about, but added nicely to the story, and it was so great to see everyone again 20 years later. Question number 13, favorite video I've done this year. For me, that would have to be the video I did on my top 10 favorite Indigenous authors, because it was a video that I felt like was important to make because sometimes these authors are underrepresented or I don't hear a lot of them talked about on BookTube very often. So it was a video that I really wanted to make, and it got a very positive response. And I thought that it was cool that people from places all over the world are interested in checking out some of these Indigenous authors from Canada. I just think it's a cool conversation to be a part of, and I'm glad that I made that video. Question number 14, most beautiful book I've bought or received this year. I'm going to go with one called A True Novel by Mine Mizumura, who's a Japanese author. I read about her in an article where she was called like the anti-Haruki Murakami, so very different style of writing apparently. All I really know about this book is that it's some kind of Japanese retelling of Wuthering Heights. But anyway, I think that it is a really beautiful edition of this book. So it's a really long novel, and this one comes in 2 parts. So it's kind of all put together nicely in this little box. And then we have our 2 different parts, which each have a lovely little photograph on each of them. So yeah, looking forward to reading this one. Question number 15, book I need to read by the end of the year. I find the whole end of the year thing is kind of arbitrary. I don't really care when I finish a book. It could be now, it could be in 2018, but I look forward to spending a lot of time with this puppy. This is the Essential Chomsky, which is a collection of works by Noam Chomsky. I think that he is such a brilliant thinker, and I want to be smarter and more educated about world issues. So I am looking forward to learning a lot by checking out this collection of stuff by Noam Chomsky. So that ends my bookish freakout for the first half of 2017. I know a lot of people have done this tag already, but if you haven't, you should. And I'm going to tag 2 channels who are newer to BookTube, but I've been enjoying their stuff so far. I'm going to tag Bookish Betsy and Tales of Adventure. So I hope that you guys get around to doing this tag. And that's all I got for you today. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.